Hello, friends. This is Darren Hayes of PigskinDispatch.com. Before we take you to your favorite Sports History Network show, just want to tell you a little bit about some merch that you can pick up that represents your favorite SHN podcast. So far, there's t-shirts, coffee mugs, and even books from some of the authors that do podcasts right here on SHN. Who could buy something better than that than have the history right from the gentleman that you hear talking about it? But we also are adding things each and every day. And where's that store, may you ask? Well, it's at SportsHistoryNetwork.com. Up at the top, there is the SHN merch button. Click on that. It'll take you right to the store, and you can be representing your favorite podcast and show the world that, hey, on the swag that I'm using, it's the headquarters of Sports Yesteryear, Sports History Network, and my favorite podcaster, the Sports History Network store. Shop there today.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com. On September 1st, 1939, German forces led by Adolf Hitler invaded Poland by air and land in a swift, heavy blow, starting World War II, in a move that would be known as the Blitzkrieg strategy, which basically translates into a lightning war courtesy of a heavy concentration of firepower along a narrow front to overwhelm an enemy. Although obviously not as a serious of an event, this is reminiscent of how the tight end position operates in the trenches and out in the open field. And about a month and a half after this invasion that started World War II and changed the world, a future tight end was born that would operate his own blitzkrieg on the league and change the landscape of the NFL forever. You simply know him as Ditka.
Welcome to the Football History Dude Podcast, where each episode is a journey back in time to learn about the rich history of the NFL. Your host is Arnie Chapman. Football is his passion, and he wants you to come along with him to explore the yesteryear of the gridiron. So hop on board his DeLorean, and let's get this baby up to 88 miles per hour.
This time, just up to the DeLorean. The date is October 18th, 1939 in Carnegie, Pennsylvania. A town just a little southwest of Pittsburgh. We're in steel country, folks. This is blue-collar, hard-working, American territory, and across the nation we're wondering what's going to happen over there in Europe. At this time, who really knew? But what we do know is that a baby is being born that will grow up to change the landscape of the NFL in more ways than one. Iron Mike Ditka will grow up in this tough neck of the woods and go on to play football as a consensus All-American for the University of Pittsburgh, en route to being drafted as the number 1 overall pick of the 1961 NFL Draft by the Chicago Bears. What happened next? Well, that was his blitzkrieg moment on the league. Because as a rookie, in only 14 games, mind you, at a position primarily known for blocking and toughness, he would go on to amass 56 catches for 1,076 yards and a whopping 12 touchdowns, which would help him win the Rookie of the Year award. And again, the league would never be the same. And that's what this week's guest is here to share with us. His name is Tyler Dunne of Go Long and many other publications. The reason we have Tyler on the show is to discuss his recently released book, The Blood and Guts, How Tight Ends Save Football. And whether you agree with that statement or not, how tight ends save football, if you're a fan of the sport, you have to appreciate the multiple skills that a tight end must possess to survive, let alone thrive, in any era of the NFL. So sit back, relax, and... wait a minute, hold up. Before we get into this interview, did you follow or subscribe to this podcast, or like it depending on where you're listening to? If you did not, then you need to pause, mash that little subscribe button on your podcast player of choice. That way you get the hottest, freshest off the press episodes, each and every week. Okay, now that you've done that, now you can go ahead and sit back, relax, and enjoy this interview with author Tyler Dunne. First thing I want to do before we really get into this whole thing is I know the book released, what was it, yesterday, October 18th?
Right, yep.
Not just the process of being released, but you got a sigh of relief and excitement. What's going on there? What's that process of releasing a book for your first time?
Oh my God, it was It was pretty surreal, right? When you pour yourself into a project like this, it really does need to dominate your life. For better or worse, that was the advice so many book writers gave me, is like, if you're going to take on a book, you better be passionate about it. Like, it better be the first thing you think of when you wake up in the morning, because if it's not, inevitably, it will be at some point. You've got deadlines to meet. You've got interviews to set up, to conduct, to transcribe, to piece together. It can't be a job. I mean, you really do have to love it. And really, that was core to this whole project. It was a pure love for football. I think we all remember that moment. We fell in love with the game, and seeing how it's evolved, how it's changed, how maybe it's kind of getting a little softer, a little overly sanitized, and being a little pissed off about it. Hey, we want football to remain the same. We want it to be, high intensity, high pressure packed environment. Guess what? It's going to be aggressive. There's going to be some violence, and the overcorrection, I think, has been a little too much. So, I was passionate about it because I really wanted to find those individuals who are preserving like the soul of the sport. And that's what led me to, Mike Ditka's golf course, or the bar with Jeremy Shockey, or hanging out with Tony Gonzalez, talking to Rob Gronkowski, George Kittle. I mean, these are the players that, it could have been a book about linemen, right? I mean, they're in the trenches. That's real football, but they're not as visible. A lineman has a good game if you don't hear about that dude for 3 hours. Like, the tight ends are visible. You're going to this guy on 3rd and long with the season on the line. So you have that combination. You have to do a little bit of everything at the tight end position. And the more you learn about the position and how mentally straining it can be day in and day out, it is most reflective of everyday life. Whatever your profession, and that's the way Tony Gonzalez put it, America can relate to the tight end, because the tight end has to do it all.
So you basically just answered my first question as to like why the book, and why did you choose to write about the tight end? But again, for the listener to the show, I have a copy of the book right here. So it's The Blood and Guts, How Tight Ends Save Football. You kind of allude to it, I guess, right there, Save Football, but maybe dig deeper. Like, why that title for your book?
It depends on how you view the sport, right? I mean, I think a lot of folks watch football for different reasons. I mean, if you have a favorite team and you just want that team to win, I get it. Maybe you've got a gambling bet. Maybe you got a fantasy football lineup to put in. But when it comes to the sport itself, the purity of the game, the fact that this isn't for everybody, and that's okay. Like, there's an element of risk, I think, in football that you just frankly don't get in other sports. I've talked to guys about it. I mean, Chris Borland is somebody who decided to step away from the game after 1 year. Shocked the world. I mean, here's a linebacker out of Wisconsin with the San Francisco 49ers who has 100 tackle per year potential, a future Pro Bowler, stepping away because of concussion concerns. Even Chris Borland tells me that, look, there's something special about football. There's something special about knowing that there's a buddy next to you, and if either one of you don't do your job correctly, then you could injure your friend. You could injure yourself. That inherent risk, it's, you don't just pick up a baseball bat and go to the park with your friends and get that kind of feeling, get that kind of emotion. I think we can look at these dudes as modern day gladiators to take that reality on. And hey, if you want to step away, that's perfectly fine. If you want to look after your health, that's incredible. Do it. But there's going to be people that are going to be willing to take on that risk. And I think that I just wish the NFL was a little bit more upfront with that honesty about the violence, because they really aren't, in my opinion. So I guess that's where it's rooted, right? I mean, just what is real football? And to me, it's that fact that it's not for everybody, and it's the best of the very best playing a violent game. And how is it being preserved? And I think that the tight end position, because of the physical and the mental and emotional and spiritual demands that go into it, it is something that can carry on. I think there are so many similarities between a Mike Ditka and a Jeremy Shockey and a Rob Gronkowski and a George Kittle. And we kind of hit on these themes throughout, where that's the player that can really keep it alive visibly, right? We see George Kittle down the field, splitting the seam, catching a touchdown, and then going crazy in the end zone. We can see it, we can celebrate it, and it's a hell of a lot of fun.
Yeah, you kind of mentioned it earlier too, like a modern day gladiators, or maybe the fact of being able to. I can't say I've played every sport by any means, but I've played many of the sports, and I can't compare the camaraderie that you get with football to any of the other sports that I would have played. Of course, it's like you're going to battle with each other, kind of thing, and you might not even be. You might be the one that's the third string long snapper, whatever it is, but during practice, you're still going through all of the same kind of, ups and downs as far as your teammates go. And I mean, did you play yourself, or like, do you have experience at all from that perspective?
Yeah. I think, God, I can remember playing from as far back as my memory goes, all the way through JV football, varsity football. I played 1 year college D3 before transferring to Syracuse and pursuing this journalism career. I was a quarterback back in the day. I'm going to sound like some washed up, balding white dude from the middle of nowhere, but it's true. I was a quarterback once upon a time, and we had a pretty good team. We won sectionals. We'll take it. But we all remember just that moment. I mean, that pressure, right? Of playing under the lights on Friday with your buddies. There's something special about that. I mean, there's something magical about that. And I think it's something that everybody can kind of relate to, that football can just kind of teach you things in life that you can't really get in any other sport, any other hobby, any other activity at all. There's something different when you're on the field and there's collisions all over the place, and you're calling a play, and you've got an assignment, and you're accountable to the guy next to you, man, and you've got to do everything right in a matter of 4, 5, 6 seconds. And guess what? Those 4, 5, 6 seconds are going to be in your mind, in your memory for the rest of time. I mean, for good or bad, you can remember those plays from high school forever. There's something pretty cool about that pressure. And I think that these players in the NFL, they're the best of the very best. They're the ones that we can look to and really, I don't know. I mean, it's in one sense, it's hard to relate to somebody in this profession where you're beating each other up in your day job and just then you're in the cold tub hanging out. It's weird, right? Like George Kittle put it that way. Like that's not a normal thing to do in any American profession. But when it comes to tight end, you can relate to that position because, Tony Gonzalez, Dallas Clark, all of these guys are detailing. You do kind of have to do things you don't necessarily want. Now, Tony Gonzalez, he doesn't want to do that inline blocking drill at practice and get all bruised up, but he does it. Shannon Sharpe didn't necessarily want to rededicate himself as a blocker in the late 90s with the Denver Broncos, but he did it, and they won Super Bowls. I think that we all kind of relate to that in our everyday lives. Like we all have to do things we don't necessarily want to do, but we need to do, and it's good for your character. And so I think maybe that's why we kind of gravitate toward a Gronk and a Kittle and a Kelsey, all these guys as well.
Yeah, I mean, I just, as you're mentioning that, I thought of so many different moments, and whether it was my life or my career, whatever it might have been, and just then reliving some of my struggles in football again, just like that. It's like, it kind of prepared you at the moment. Maybe you didn't realize it. The coaches always say, you're going to miss this running, all these wind sprints and hills and stuff like that. And maybe not the specific hill itself I don't miss, but yeah, the camaraderie and going through all that with the teammates, I definitely miss all that myself.
There's something cool about it. You're right. It lasts forever. No doubt.
So you mentioned, I mean, we're going to get into, of course, the names of the players that you're able to, the characters. I got to imagine the characters and the stories are going to be intriguing, especially as you go through the book. You get to read some of these stories that you don't hear other places. It's not a typical book, going through it's like a story, history, what it means to be a tight end and a player in the league, and then also just a person on this planet. But how did you, okay, so I'm looking through the book, right? And I got the different, the chapters. So not specifically does it have the player, but it turned out where each chapter essentially is like a biography, I guess we'll call it, or whatever you want to say. It's like a profile. Like, how did you choose to organize this book? What went through your mind?
Right. I think that there's two ways to read the Blood and Guts. If you want to just jump around, if you want to read about Ben Coates or Shannon Sharpe or Kellen Winslow or Jeremy Shockey and just boom, get to that chapter, no doubt you can do it. Get 10,000 words or so and learn what made this individual uniquely qualified to preserve everything we're talking about here. Everything that we love about the sport itself and what it teaches you and what we love about it. But there is a narrative too. I really do, recommend people read it start to finish because you can see so many themes develop from Ditka in chapter 1 all the way to Kittle in chapter 15. It might be something as simple as Mike Ditka really viewing himself as that apex predator on the field, top of the food chain, right? If you come at him, he's going to be blasting you 10 times. And I think that that was new. That was different. That was football itself. And you can see that trait kind of carry through to somebody like Jeremy Shockey. 40 years later, Jeremy Shockey is somebody who is going to seek that vengeance. If he can interpret a slight, or if he hears, who was it? We've got a story of David Gibson for the Indianapolis Colts. Tell the Indianapolis Star ahead of a game that, Jeremy Shockey's he's no Tony Gonzalez. Well, when they played that week, Jeremy Shockey sought him out, lowered his shoulder, and just blasted right through Gibson like he wanted to deliver the pain, like he read every word and it meant a lot to him. So that element was very Ditka-esque, and you see it in a Kittle, in a Gronk, in their play style. So, there's the relationship between a quarterback and a tight end is another thing that comes up again and again. There's names. Bill Belichick's name pops up a handful of times in this book. You can see how somebody like that is at the forefront of the evolution of the position. Mark Bruner is a name that might surprise people to see in there. Hey, he's a throwback 90s inline blocker who embraced that 12-round fight, coached by Mike Mularkey. There's a lot of good that comes with that kind of tight end. And then Mike Mularkey's coaching Tony Gonzalez in the next chapter. And they have an epic showdown where they don't see eye to eye on the position, on life, on a lot of things, and they nearly go to blows. So I do think that there's definitely a narrative that folks will want to kind of stick with reading start to finish. But hey, by all means, jump all over the place if you want.
Yeah, I would recommend reading it, like you said, read through the narrative initially first, and then maybe go back and read some of the individual chapters as you want to read more and dive into it. But so you kind of alluded to it with like the evolution. If I'm sitting at a grocery line store with you, the old school, where you actually sit in line and you're like, got the guy bagging your groceries and such. We got a couple minutes here. You're going to tell me the story of the evolution of the tight end, just from the role, not specifically the players only. How would that go?
I'd say it was founded by Mike Ditka. Before Mike Ditka, there's split ends, there's ends, there's not really a receiving threat in line at that end position. And then all of a sudden Mike Ditka and John Mackey are catching a pass and running over everybody. And then it evolves into Jackie Smith making plays down the field, outrunning DBs deep into the secondary and having that indomitable energy late in the fourth quarter to just make those plays. Again, he's really a player that is far more than those 5.5 seconds that defined him in a Super Bowl in many people's eyes. Ozzie Newsome, the acrobatics down the field, the ability to catch literally everything. He didn't drop the ball. Kellen Winslow, matchup nightmare. That's when the scheme comes into play. And Don Coryell is just changing offensive football forever. You see elements to the Coryell offense in Dallas in the 90s, in The Greatest Show on Turf, with the St. Louis Rams, and it all started with Winslow kind of being the tip of that spear, a physical freak. Guys thought it was a player from the Los Angeles Lakers, out wide, 6'6", 260, whatever he was, just wreaking havoc. So then coordinators and coaches start to think, okay, if we can find a creature like that and move him around at the tight end position, how are defenses going to defend this? So, then you get a wide receiver from Savannah State, Shannon Sharp. Dan Reeves says, let's put him at tight end. And he puts on a little weight. He learns to block just enough. If he stays a wide receiver, he flames out of the NFL in a year or two. He's done. He doesn't last. So then that thought is put into heads. But it was really Tony Gonzalez that I think answers your question, because he forced teams and front offices and personnel people to view the tight end position through a different lens. Like, this is somebody who can maybe have basketball in their past that is going to just reach atop your head in the secondary and pluck a football out of the sky and bend it at every impossible angle. Nobody really looked and sounded and played like Tony Gonzalez before. And it was weird for, I think, the Mike Mularkeys of the world and even Dick Vermeil and Trent Green and those Chiefs teams. They didn't really want to feature Tony Gonzalez like he could have been featured. I mean, really, he kind of forced the league to evolve, even though he wasn't the go-to guy for much of his career. But once Tony Gonzalez did what he did, and it was indisputable, and the numbers spoke for themselves, Antonio Gates gets a shot out of Kent State. Jimmy Graham gets a shot after playing basketball at University of Miami. And you fast forward to today, my God, you better have an athletic tight end or something closely resembling a Graham, a Gronk, a Winslow, a Gates. Otherwise, your offense is going to be pretty stale. It's going to be pretty lame. You need that physically imposing athletic tight end to move around and do creative things all over the field. And there's a lot of them. That's the good thing. College, the college ranks, they're producing a lot of this athleticism now. It's harder to find the blockers. You kind of have to coach that blocking up. But that athleticism at the tight end position, that's here to stay.
So as you went through that and you get to the end there, I know Kittle's like at the end. So why end with Kittle as opposed to maybe some of the other star tight ends in the league right now?
Because I think George Kittle, and this is no knock on Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews or Kyle Pitts. These are all great tight ends, but Kittle understood the world in which Mike Ditka, basically created. And Kittle has a lot of long conversations with his dad about just the field kind of being this sacred place where you understand the men who walked that walk before you. And that when you step on the field, every single play, there's an eye in the sky watching you. And the ball might not be coming your way. The play may not be designed for you, but by God, you better bury the player across the line of scrimmage because you owe it to yourself. You owe it to your teammates. You owe it to the Dickas and the Winslows and the Newsoms and the Jackie Smiths and all these tight ends who came before you. I think that really does mean a lot to George Kittle. Like the big picture of everything. Let alone the fact that, just watch a game. Like he can still make plays down the field. He's no slouch as a receiver, but it's the blocking that's, hilarious, frankly. That he's just, embarrassing DBs on a play-to-play basis. And that's rare in 2022. So I think that really he is the one that's the gold standard today to keep it alive. And you're striving for that Kittle. If you have a tight end that can block, not just block, if you have a tight end who can maul and destroy like George Kittle, schematically, it just gives you so much unpredictability. Like as an offensive coordinator, you can keep a defense off balance because, if you have a thin, narrowly built tight end in name only, defenses aren't going to fall for that. They know you're not running power that direction. They know you're not running anything that direction on the ground. So they can tilt their coverage. They can do certain things. That's why I think George Kittle, he might only have 40 yards in the game. And you might think, he didn't really help my fantasy team today. Well, how many yards rushing did San Francisco have? And that's the value of a George Kittle.
Yeah, so as we move forward, here's a game we get to play on this show. I don't know if I told you this yet, but I don't know if you can see this DeLorean right here. So yeah, you get to go. You get to go 20 years into the future, 2042, and tell me what does the role of the tight end look like at that point? Do you think?
I think that the tight end is going to be a lot. I think Kyle Pitts is what is going to become of the tight end position, and that's a good thing because I think Kyle Pitts is going to become a good blocker. Knowing him, how he's wired, his coaching, I think he'll develop that part of his game. I think he can add that element. He's not going to be Kittle. He's not going to be Gronk. He's not just going to be stuffing people into a gym locker. But I think that his ability to just burn a cornerback down the field, deep on routes, with one cut, that's different, right? He's got a quick twitch to him as a tight end that I don't even know if Tony Gonzalez and Antonio Gates and some of these guys had where, yeah, that's going to be a problem for teams. If you've got a literally wide receiver built tight end who can block a little bit and is that dynamic deep down the field, that's what teams are going to strive for. And probably that, hey, back in the lab in those 7-on-7 camps in high school, that player's probably already being created.
Yeah, it's curious to see how at one point, because you mentioned the overcorrection and just how things change as far as schemes and stuff. And at some point, I wonder to when we're going to start going back to seeing more of that heavy run because the defense goes so light and all that kind of thing. I mean, we see it here and there, but not to that extent. Back in the day, okay, let's take you to your childhood. You could call it the DeLorean moment if you wish. Who was your team growing up and maybe your favorite tight end?
You know, even though I grew up in Western New York, I was actually a massive Green Bay Packers fan growing up. So, love the Packers. You know, they had Mark Chmura, they had Keith Jackson, Bubba Franks. But a favorite tight end? Man, that's a good question. I'd say, you know who my favorite tight end was as a kid? Growing up in Buffalo and seeing him twice a year, it was Ben Coates. I think Ben Coates is a player that gets his just due in my book, The Blood and Guts, and doesn't. Nationally, for whatever reason. He's not on NFL Network. He's not on ESPN. He's not shilling and campaigning to be in the Hall of Fame. Power to him for not selling out. It's just not in his makeup. But his game was Hall of Fame worthy. He was somebody one-on-one who could block Reggie White, Bruce Smith, Lawrence Taylor at the start of his career, and also do damage in the passing game. I mean, God, he played through so much pain. We talk all about it, where even once his helmet kind of got shoved a weird direction. He caught like a little metal shard on the side of his head and he's gushing blood. He missed 2 games in his career. One was because his mom tragically passed. The other was a high ankle sprain that can keep guys out weeks, months. He played through so much. He's tough as hell. I mean, it's really the product of his upbringing. You know, from age 7 to age 20, he's building roofs with his dad. You know, World War II veteran, his dad. His brothers are fighting wars in the Middle East. There is a country toughness to Ben Coates, which was awesome to watch. I mean, maybe it was the big shoulder pads, too. It felt like this dude was 8 feet tall out there, just blasting through anything that moved. I think Ben Coates. Let's go with him as my favorite tight end.
Yeah, I mean, he was definitely that type of a player, like you said. I mean, I don't remember specifically in my mind watching him because he wasn't that flashy guy. I think as a kid, you don't realize it, but then I'm going to have to stop this show probably because I don't know if you can see this guy right here. So.
Barry Sanders, there he is. Okay.
So there you go. So that's what I'm trying to get at is you trying to come at me saying you're a Packers fan, bro. Me as a Lions fan, like that ain't going to fly in this neck of the woods. The listener of the show already knew it was coming. So.
It took me a second because I love Barry Sanders. I was like, wait a minute. He loves the player. He was entertaining. You know, here you go. For my money, the most entertaining player in NFL history is Barry Sanders. Maybe the single best player in NFL history. I don't know. I'm not just. He was unstoppable. He was fun to watch. Nobody ran like him before, and nobody will run like Barry Sanders after.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay. I'm going to give you a pass again, though, because when you mentioned moments that you remember, I don't remember what year it is. And in my mind, it might not even been the Packers. I really don't know. But I remember sitting goal line, watching a play develop over the middle of the field. I'm pretty sure. I'm going to say it was the Packers because I want to now. And it was David Sloan. Do you remember that name at all?
Yes. Lions tight end.
So there you go. David Sloan hitting over the middle, catching this pass. And it was just, I remember watching the play develop. That was the first time I realized like what it meant to watch the play develop because on TV, you don't get to see that stuff. You see it after the ball is already there. So it was like the moment that sticks in my head. And yes, it was David Sloan. I'm going to say it was the Packers just because, especially our conversation right now. But other than that, let's move on to, you told so many stories in the book about being able to go across the country. I mean, talk about some characters. I mean, the tight end position itself just breeds. You got to be a character to be able to stick around and deal with that. I mean, like just pick 1 or 2 stories from being with these guys, whether it made the book or not.
Oh my goodness gracious. There were so many. I really do think that, you know, hanging out with Jeremy Shockey down in Miami Beach has to be at the top of the list when we're just, you know, hanging out over a couple drinks, hearing what life was like growing up in Ada, Oklahoma, to the U, to the Giants, to the Saints, to the Panthers. And yeah, by the way, here, I don't know if this answers your question. One thing I definitely want to hit on it, because I don't know if people realize this about Jeremy Shockey. We know how he's this party animal and, you know, he's sleeping with chicks, and he was pretty open about that. He didn't have girlfriends. But he didn't want to be bogged down by a relationship. But he lived his life the way Jeremy Shockey wanted to live his life. He worked hard. He played hard. Rob Gronkowski loved it from afar and took it to a whole new level. But a story that people out there should know is Jeremy Shockey saved the dude's life. When he was with the Carolina Panthers his last season, Ben Hartsock, tight end, was choking in the team cafeteria. And a teammate initially went up to give him the Heimlich and it wasn't working. It was more like spooning the dude. Like he's like, he wasn't really getting to it at all. Jeremy Shockey just, like it's any old Tuesday, just steps up, polishes off his mouth, puts his dinner aside for a moment, goes up to Hartsock and just boom, one hard shot, out comes the food, saves his life. As the trach unit's coming in, like the trainers are coming in ready to cut his throat open to save his life. They're seeing Jeremy Shockey beat him to the punch. Shockey just sits back down and finishes off his meal and has himself a nice day. So he knows the Heimlich maneuver, put it to use, saved Ben Hartsock's life, basically.
Shockey too, just for some reason, it was like, I think it was a preseason game where he like stiff armed a dude like out of the sidelines or something like that. I just remember him just tough, nasty kind of player.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That was the moment in the Hall of Fame game, Canton, Ohio, Houston Texans, just a one-man hell-bent for election, running through the whole defense, just stiff-arming and dropping his shoulder. And that was, Ernie Accorsi was the GM for the Giants at the time. And, he brought up John Mackey's name. So you bring up a Hall of Famer's name after a play like that. There were Hall of Fame expectations for Jeremy Shockey. He didn't live up to that because he couldn't stay healthy. I mean, his play style was such that, it was personal abuse when he's just running over everybody and refusing to go out of bounds and refusing to go down. He played through so many injuries. But I think his impact on the game is everlasting. There's a reason he's on the cover of the book, and people are going to see that when they read that chapter, because there's a whole generation of kids looking up to his play style, his Ditka-like, linebacker-like mentality, that wanted to emulate it. And like I said, Rob Gronkowski was one of those young teenagers from Buffalo, New York, writing him a letter right to the Giants facility, telling him how much he loved his game, the way he went about everything. Fast forward a generation, and Rob Gronkowski's the greatest tight end ever. And he is partying his ass off, having the time of his life, enjoying every minute of it, living like there's no tomorrow. Just like Jeremy Shockey.
Okay, you kind of said it right there, Rob Gronkowski, greatest tight end of all times or whatever. I was going to ask a question that I know is not fair because you can't go era to era and try to like transcend time and all that stuff. So I'm going to change my question up a little bit. You get to pick, kind of like how they do on those ESPN, where you like get the arm of this quarterback, the mental of this, whatever. Pick 3 tight ends that you can mold, and what traits are you grabbing from them tight ends to create the perfect tight end of all time?
Ooh, I like that question. I think you go with the athleticism of Tony Gonzalez, the heart of Dallas Clark. I think that he's one of the hardest working NFL players I've ever talked to in my life. And the toughness of Mike Ditka. I'm still going here. Sorry, let's do one more tray here. How about the hands of Ozzie Newsome? The hands and the eyes of Ozzie Newsome. He had one drop early in his career, didn't drop a ball after that. Practice game didn't matter. He caught everything. So there's the perfect tight end for you.
All right, so that'll bust they have the 99 ratings in Madden, but they officially get 100 for the first time or whatever it is. So that works for me. Let's get into, beyond the book again. The book, let's remind
100%, no doubt about it.
Remind the listeners of the show. So, okay, the title of the book and where they can find it.
No doubt about it. The Blood and Guts, How Tight Ends Save Football. Amazon's always the easiest, right? We're ordering everything on Amazon. So hardcover, Kindle, Audible, it's all there. But obviously Barnes & Noble, Indie Books, your local bookstores, wherever you want to get your books, you'll find it there. It was such a passion project in every conceivable way. I mean, it was a hell of a lot of fun. I mean, who doesn't want to just hang out with Mike Ditka at his golf course, Shockey at the bar, Tony Gonzalez, Jackie Smith. We didn't talk about him nearly enough. I think that's a player that chapter 3, it's going to open some people's eyes what he went through even after he was done playing. And like I said, this book, it becomes a lot more about life than just a position on a football field itself.
Yeah, and I would love to have you get in and tell all these stories, but that's what the book's for. So we're going to go ahead and let the listener of the show grab their copy of the book, and maybe they'll get you later down the road as far as some other stories. But speaking of your stories and all your other work, so we have the Go Long podcast and the website and everything. What is that? What is the actual web address? So if the listener of the show wants to learn more about your work.
Oh, no doubt. GoLongTD.com. So that's just my initials for Tyler Dunne and Touchdown, I guess. All long-form journalism, profiles, deep dives on teams. Just try to go beyond the surface level stuff that we get on, the bottom line of a TV screen or on our Twitter feeds. I've definitely built up some relationships around the NFL over the years, and yeah, just want to try to cover this game in a very unique way, tap into those relationships, and you can just plug your email right in. There's a paid subscription to get everything at Go Long, but you can always just hop on that free list initially when you hit subscribe. Get posts for free, and if you like it, you can always upgrade. And also, I'm sorry, I didn't answer your question. There's a podcast too. Yes, we have the Go Long podcast. Former Buffalo Bills director of personnel Jim Monos is my co-host. And also Isaiah McKenzie for the Buffalo Bills. They're starting slot receiver. We have a show, 8 episodes through the year to kind of bring fans closer to the game, closer. You're going to get at a podium.
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned this in the pre interview or whatever, but we need a McKenzie. Let's get him as many catches after the bye week as possible, some touchdowns. I got so much shares of best ball in him because I looked at him as a potential prospect. Speaking of the long form content, like I said, it is long. I mean, your articles and the in-depth bios, that one article about the Packers and all that kind of thing that you had, that was the greatest or the most read of all time on Bleacher Report. Like, what's the next book? I mean, what are your plans for the next book then?
That's a great question. I've got some ideas, nothing too concrete. I think I've got to wrap my head around those ideas a little bit more. I'm not even to the pitch yet, so it's hard to say. It's hard to say, but when it's going to happen, maybe we'll let these kids grow up a year or two and then take on another project. But I promise you, I loved it. It was fun. It was time consuming in the best possible ways. When you really pour yourself into something and get to hold it and read it and see it and talk about it like we're doing now, it's pretty dang cool. And more than anything, I just can't wait for everybody else to hear the stories that I've been hearing for the past year from these tight ends. Yeah,
dude, I could tell that you legit enjoyed, you thoroughly had a blast writing this book, and you have the passion and you want to just continue this, all of their stories, you want to continue it through time. So with that being said, last words of Gridiron Knowledge Nuggets for the listener of the show through the lens maybe of a tight end.
Here it is. And I've done a lot of these pods and radio shows on this book tour, and I don't think this has come up, but both Tony Gonzalez and Dallas Clark, Dallas thinks they couldn't be any more different as people, as players, all of that. With where Dallas comes from, Iowa, walk on, Tony Gonzalez, just doesn't look like he's got a scab on his body. He's just perfect, right? He's on TV all the time. He's perfect. They could not be more similar in terms of how they live their life. Especially when it comes to being a dad and the life experiences that they both had. They both went through their share of adversity, and they want their own kids to somehow go through adversity in their own lives. And, maybe you create it, you definitely don't hand out a silver platter, but they just really stress the value of needing to deal with crap in life and needing to overcome it and not being a snowplow parent that just, opens up the pearly gates to everything. And I think that was so cool. Like Dallas Clark, he moved his family back to Livermore, Iowa when he was done. Could have gone anywhere because he wanted his kids to learn what hard work really is. I mean, Tony Gonzalez, he wants his kids to learn what hard work really is and does different things. So that self-driven child it's so valued by these tight ends that, I've got 2 kids now, and they're 3 and 1, so we're not quite there yet, but it's already on my mind, like how you've got to go through hard times. Hard times are just good for the soul.
There you go. Hard times are good for the soul. Speaking of hard times and being good for the soul, maybe that's why I'm such a resilient individual sometimes, because you sort of have to be if you're a lifelong Detroit Lions fan. But anywho, Hope you enjoyed this interview with Tyler Dunne, and make sure after listening to this interview, you head out to your favorite bookstore, or maybe online, I suppose, and pick up your copy of The Blood and Guts, How Tight Ends Save Football. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Football History Dude. To make sure you're the first to get the next episode, please subscribe on your podcast player of choice and head on over to thefootballhistorydude.com for the show notes and more information on the history of the NFL. And remember, dudes, where we're going, we don't need roads.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, aka the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website, seriously, all you got to do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you got to do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.